Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into Pride and Prejudice again, this time chapters 7 through 12.
Lots to unpack there.
Oh, for sure. We get right into the thick of things with the Bennets, the Bingleys, and
Mr. Darcy, of course.
Mr. Darcy. Always stirring things up. One thing that always strikes me is how Austen lays out the stakes for the Bennet sisters right away. You know, their whole future basically hinges on marriage.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. Mr. Bennet's estate is entailed away to a male heir. That £2,000 a year, gone. Poof.
Exactly. And what does Mrs. Bennet have? £4,000. That won't last forever.
Not at all, especially with their lifestyle. Austen really makes you feel the pressure on these women, you know? Marriage isn't just about love, it's about economic survival.
And then we have the militia arriving. Talk about a whirlwind, especially for Catherine and Lydia, right?
Oh, they're completely swept up in the excitement. Uniforms, balls, it's all so glamorous to them. But, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? You have the youngest sisters focused on these dashing officers, and then Mrs. Bennet, she's got her sights set firmly on Mr. Bingley and his fortune. It's like Austen is showing us how society dictates women's choices, even in matters of the heart.
And then poor Jane gets sick after visiting Netherfield. I always have to laugh at Mrs. Bennet's reaction, though. She's so transparent in her scheming.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, it's not just about Mrs. Bennet's maneuvering. Jane's illness plays into all these societal expectations about women, right? The delicate flower who needs constant care and attention.
Which makes Elizabeth's decision to walk 3 miles in the mud to see Jane all the more striking.
Right. Talk about defying expectations. And the reactions. The Bingley sisters are horrified. Bingley is charmed, but Darcy.
Darcy is a mystery wrapped in an enigma. What's he thinking?
I think he's intrigued, but also a bit judgmental. He's got all these ideas about what makes a woman accomplished, and Elizabeth doesn't quite fit the mold.
Oh, tell me about it. Music, singing, drawing, languages, extensive reading. It's an impossible standard.
It makes you wonder if Austen is poking fun at those expectations, you know? Especially when Bingley chimes in with his jokes about painting tables and netting purses. Maybe she found those pursuits a bit frivolous herself.
And Elizabeth, of course, calls Darcy out on it. He's not afraid to challenge him, to spar with him intellectually. You can practically see the sparks flying.
Oh, absolutely. Like when Darcy, knowing Elizabeth hates reels, suggests they dance one, he's testing her and she knows it.
And she doesn't back down. I love that about her. And they're back and forth about pride and vanity. It's not just witty banter. It reveals so much about how they see the world.
Exactly. He sees pride as something noble. She sees it as a potential flaw. Their whole worldviews are clashing, and it's fascinating to watch.
But there's one person who's not enjoying this little battle of wits. Miss Bingley. Her jealousy over Darcy's attention to Elizabeth is palpable.
Oh, she's doing everything she can to undermine Elizabeth. Those snide remarks about her family, trying to manipulate Darcy with those ridiculous hypothetical marriage scenarios.
It's so obvious. But you know what's funny?
What's that?
Darcy doesn't seem to pick up on it at all. He's so focused on Elizabeth, it's like Miss Bingley's scheming just fades into the background.
It definitely speaks volumes about his growing interest.
But alas, the visit to Netherfield has to come to an end. Mrs. Bennet drags the girls back home, though not without making sure Bingley knows how eligible Jane is, of course.
Oh, of course. That woman never misses an opportunity. But it's fascinating to see everyone's reactions as they depart. Bingley's genuinely sad to see them go. The Bingley sisters put on a show of regret. But Darcy, that deliberate coldness towards Elizabeth.
It's like he's trying to suppress something, isn't it? He's building walls, even as he's drawn to her. The tension is just incredible.
It makes you wonder what's going on beneath the surface. What's he really thinking?
That's the brilliance of Austen. She leaves us wanting more, eager to see what happens next.
Oh, I can't wait to delve into the next few chapters. There's so much more to uncover. You know, what really gets me in these chapters is the family dynamic. I mean, the Bennets are a whole study in contrasts on their own.
Right? Mr. Bennet's like he's observing it all from a distance with his whip. Then you've got Mrs. Bennet, all about social status and marrying those daughters off.
Well, it was a different time, right? You can't really separate that from the world they lived in.
True. And it makes you think, how did those two even end up together?
Opposites attract, maybe. But it really shows the pressures of the era, and then each daughter's like a different reaction to it all.
Totally. Jane's so sweet, the perfect image of what a woman should be. But Elizabeth, she's got that spark, that independent streak.
And don't forget, Lydia and Kitty, the younger ones, caught up with the militia, not a care in the world.
Oh, it's almost hard to watch sometimes how they just flit around.
But Austen's clever, right? She uses that to show the danger when society cares more about appearances than what's really important.
And Mary, the middle sister, always in her books. She's like the opposite end of the spectrum.
Like she's taken intellectual to the extreme. Each sister, they're like pieces of that world Austen's showing us.
It's like she's holding up a mirror, showing us the good and the bad, you know. But she does it with such heart. You can't help but care about these people.
Exactly. And we're right there with Elizabeth as she tries to figure it all out. Love, society, her own feelings about Darcy.
She's smart. She sees things clearly, but she makes mistakes too, like we all do.
And Darcy, well, he's all caught up in his pride, but you can see that Elizabeth's getting to him.
It's a slow burn, that's for sure. But every time they talk, there's that tension.
And Austen's dialogue, Chef's kiss, the way she uses words to tell you about a character, it's amazing.
Like when Darcy defends Bingley, he says, to yield without conviction is no compliment to the understanding of either.
Oh, that's so Darcy. You know right then how much he values integrity.
And Elizabeth, she doesn't miss a beat, right? She says, you appear to me, Mr. Darcy, to allow nothing for the influence of friendship and affection.
So good. She's all about human connection, that empathy he seems to lack.
They might not agree, but they respect each other's minds. That's got to count for something.
It's what makes their whole relationship so interesting. They challenge each other, make each other think.
And then, every so often, Darcy lets that guard down. Like when he suggests they dance a reel, knowing Elizabeth hates him.
Oh, yeah. He tries so hard to be composed, all proper, but his feelings sneak out.
And Elizabeth, she's starting to see past her first impression of him. Intrigued, maybe? Even by that pride of his?
Oh, definitely. It's a complicated dance they're doing, that's for sure. 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
And let's not forget Miss Bingley stirring the pot the whole time, trying to keep them...
That's like she's trying to convince herself that Darcy's not falling for Elizabeth.
But Darcy barely notices, does he? He's got tunnel vision for Elizabeth at this point.
Which, honestly, says a lot about how strong his feelings already are, even if he won't admit it.
But hey, it's not all serious drama and longing looks, right? Austen knows how to make us laugh.
Oh, for sure. Mrs. Bennet, bless her heart, is comedy gold. Like when she goes on and on about Sir William Lucas being so much the man of fashion. I mean, come on.
Right. Or when she insists on telling Bingley about Jane's old admirer, you just know Elizabeth wants to disappear.
That's what makes it all so real, though. They're funny, they're flawed, they're like people we actually know.
And through it all, Austen's making these points about class, about prejudice, about how society worked back then.
Yeah, you can't escape it. It's not just villains like Miss Bingley or Lady Catherine. Even Darcy has to confront those ingrained ideas.
And then there's Wickham, all charming and mysterious, but something feels off about him.
Oh, totally. Austen plants those seeds of doubt early. Is he really the good guy he seems?
And Elizabeth, already not a fan of Darcy, she's ready to believe Wickham's side of things.
Classic recipe for misunderstanding and drama. You just want to grab Elizabeth and say, wait, girl, there's more to this.
But that's what keeps us hooked, right? Figuring it all out alongside the characters.
And all those big questions Austen sets up. Individual wants versus what society says. Pride battling prejudice. What love and marriage even mean in that world.
It's amazing how much she packs into these chapters. It's not just a love story. It's a whole examination of how people lived and thought.
And you know what? It still matters today. Class, prejudice, trying to figure out who you are, those are things we still deal with.
Austen was ahead of her time, that's for sure. She understood people no matter what century they lived in.
And that's why we keep coming back to her work. It's timeless.
It's funny, right? Like Elizabeth's muddy petticoat. It's not just about being dirty.
No, it's like a statement. She's practical. She doesn't care about those silly rules the Bingley sisters are so worried about.
Shows you what they value, huh? Appearances over substance.
Exactly. Austen's sneaky like that. Even clothes tell you about a person.
And remember that bit about Darcy's library? Built up over generations and all?
Yeah, you get a sense of history there, of all that weight Darcy carries on his shoulders. Family, tradition.
Even how they talk about letter writing. Darcy, all formal and proper, versus Bingley, who just dashes things off.
Totally different personalities. It makes you think about what Pride and Prejudice really means. You know, it's not just a title.
It's in every character, the choices they make, how they act.
And that moment when Darcy goes cold at Netherfield, frustrating, right? But it shows you exactly what's going on inside him.
Some people might say he's just a snob, looking down on Elizabeth and her family.
But I think it's more than that. He can't deny he admires her. But he's scared too, right? Of what those feelings mean.
Could be his pride trying to take over, pushing her away to protect himself.
Like he's saying, nope, can't go there, too dangerous. Makes you wonder, can he actually change, overcome all that baggage?
Or will he always choose pride over, well, everything else?
Austen doesn't make it easy on us, does she? She wants us to think about it, wrestle with those questions too.
So where does that leave us? We've got this tangled web of relationships, everyone trying to figure each other out, and those sparks between Elizabeth and Darcy.
It's like watching a slow-motion collision. You know, it's going to be big, but you don't know how it'll play out.
But even beyond the romance, we see Austen's genius. She takes these little things, everyday stuff, and turns them into these huge statements about people.
Yeah, she understood something about human nature that's still true today, 200 years later. Amazing.
It makes you realize that even though times change, people, we're not so different after all. Still trying to figure out love, family, who we are in the world.
And that's why Pride and Prejudice is still so powerful. It speaks to us, even now.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up, one last thing to ponder. Darcy, with all his pride and his struggles, do you think he can truly love someone who defies everything he thought he knew? Someone like Elizabeth.
Tough one. I think that's the core of the story, isn't it? Can people change? Can they overcome their own limitations? It's not just about Darcy, it's about Elizabeth, too, and what she's willing to accept.
Love makes you do crazy things. It's about growth, about seeing past the surface, about two people challenging each other to be better.
And maybe, just maybe, changing the world around them a little bit in the process.
That's something to think about. Until next time, everyone, keep those pages turning.